Have you ever just stood next to a giant tree and thought, how? I mean, how does something so huge, so incredibly complex, come from a tiny little seed you can hold in your hand? It's one of those questions that really gets you thinking about life itself. So today, we're going to follow that incredible story. We're going to trace the journey of a plant, from that dormant seed all the way to a giant, and really unpack the secrets of its amazing growth.
Right, let's just jump straight into the big mystery. This is what we're here to figure out. It's not just about getting bigger, right? It's about this perfectly timed, perfectly ordered sequence of events. First the root pops out, then the stem, then the leaves, branches, flowers. They all show up at exactly the right time and in the right place. How on earth does the plant's internal blueprint manage to pull off this perfect performance every single time?
So, to get to the bottom of it, we're going to break this story down into 5 main chapters. We'll start at the beginning with the seed of the question itself. Then, we'll get a clear definition of what we even mean by growth. After that, we'll look at the powerful engines that drive it all, explore the fascinating rhythm of that growth, and finally, see how all these pieces come together for a cell to truly become a plant. It's pretty wild to think that every single plant, I don't care how big it is, starts its life as just one single cell, a fertilized egg, which we call a zygote. That's it. That's the first building block. And the entire journey from that one cell to a full-grown tree follows this unbelievably precise and ordered series of events. It's all there, written in a biological blueprint, and it all kicks off with one specific trigger. And that trigger is germination. You see, a seed can just sit there, totally dormant, sometimes for years, just waiting for the perfect moment, the right temperature, the perfect amount of water, and only then, when everything is just right, does it finally wake up and kickstart the whole process of growth. This moment, this is where it all begins. Okay, so our seed has germinated, it's starting to grow. But what does that word even mean? We throw it around all the time, but in biology, it has a really specific definition. And trust me, it's a lot more than just getting bigger. And here it is. The 2 most important words on this slide are irreversible and permanent. This isn't some temporary change we're talking about. It is a fundamental, lasting increase in size that takes up metabolic energy. It's like once a leaf expands, it doesn't just shrink back down. Once it's there, it's there. That's real growth. This makes it super clear, right? A leaf getting bigger, that's the real deal. That's biological growth. But a piece of dried wood swelling up when it gets wet, well, that just looks like growth. It's a physical process, and it's totally reversible. As soon as you dry it out, it shrinks right back. So that's the key difference, permanence. Real growth is here to stay. All right, so if growth is this permanent, unstoppable process, what's actually driving it? What are the engines inside the plant that let it just keep getting bigger and bigger, pretty much forever? This is where plants are just absolutely incredible. Just let that sink in for a second. Unlimited growth. Unlike you or me or most animals that have a set point where we stop growing, plants have what scientists call an open form of growth. In theory, they could just keep growing forever. And this amazing superpower is all thanks to some very special tissues in very specific parts of the plant. And here they are. These growth engines are called meristems. You've got the apical meristems, which are right at the very tips of the shoots and the roots. They're responsible for primary growth, making the plant taller and the roots longer. This is exactly why pruning works, by the way. When a gardener snips off that top bud, they're actually removing the main apical meristem, which tells the plant, hey, let's grow out sideways now, and it gets bushier. Then you've got the lateral meristems, like cambium, which make a tree trunk get thicker year after year. And to give you a sense of just how powerful these engines are, get a load of this number. A single meristem at the tip of a corn root can crank out more than 17,500 new cells every single hour. That's just a staggering rate of production. And it's one of the main ways we measure growth, by the sheer increase in the number of cells. But hold on. Growth isn't always about making more cells. Sometimes it's about making the cells you already have incredibly, ridiculously bigger. Take a watermelon, for example. A single cell inside a watermelon can swell up to 350,000 times its original size. So, you see, growth can be measured in 2 ways, more cells or bigger cells. And in a plant, both are happening all the time. Now, you might think this explosion of cells is just total chaos, but it's not. It's actually a highly controlled, beautifully choreographed process that follows a predictable rhythm. Growth happens in very distinct phases, and it follows these clear, almost mathematical patterns. And if you could zoom in on the tip of a growing root, you could actually see these three phases laid out one after another. Right at the very tip, you've got the meristematic phase. It's basically a nonstop factory of cell division. Just behind that, you enter the elongation phase. This is where those brand new cells start absorbing water and stretching out, getting way bigger, which is what physically pushes the root deeper into the soil. And then a little further back, you've got the maturation phase, where the cells stop growing and start specializing for their final jobs.
The speed of this growth also follows some interesting patterns. On the left, you've got what's called arithmetic growth. In this case, when a cell divides, only one of the two new cells keeps dividing. This gives you a really steady linear increase, 1 plus 1 plus 1. On the right, though, is geometric growth. This is where both new cells go on to divide, and their daughters divide, and so on. This leads to an exponential, explosive increase in cells. This is the kind of growth you see at the very beginning of an organism's life. But of course, in the real world, that explosive geometric growth can't go on forever. Why? Because resources are limited. There's only so much sunlight, water, and nutrients to go around. So what we actually see for most living things is this classic S-shaped curve. It starts off slow, that's the lag phase, then it hits that crazy rapid growth, the exponential phase, but eventually it starts to slow down and levels off into a stationary phase as it hits its limits. This is the realistic life story for pretty much all organisms.
Okay, so let's put this into practice with a little brain teaser. Look at these two leaves, A and B. Over the same period of time, they both got bigger. They both increased their surface area by exactly 5 square centimeters. So the question is, which one grew more?
So what do you think? While their absolute growth was exactly the same, 5 square centimeters each, the real answer is leaf A. Leaf A grew more. Why? Because it had a much higher relative growth rate. That 5 centimeter square increase was a huge deal for its tiny starting size. It actually doubled. For the much larger leaf B, adding 5 centimeters square was a pretty small proportional gain. It's a great way to remember that when we talk about growth, context is everything.
Okay, so we've been focused on growth as just getting bigger. But, a giant pile of identical cells doesn't make a leaf, or a flower, or a root. For growth to actually have a purpose, something else has to happen. The cells have to develop. And this simple equation tells the whole story. Development, which is everything a plant goes through in its life cycle, is really the sum of two big processes. Growth, which we've been talking about, and something called differentiation. That's when cells start to get specialized. Differentiation is basically when a cell decides what it wants to be when it grows up. It picks a career, it matures, and goes through these major structural changes so it can do a very specific job. For instance, to become a cell that transports water, it might have to develop a super strong, hollow, tube-like wall and get rid of all its internal parts. It totally transforms itself to serve its final function. And this is where plant cells show off their incredible flexibility. So a cell can differentiate to get a specific job. But get this, if the plant gets wounded, a living, specialized cell can actually de-differentiate. It's like it goes back to the drawing board, forgetting its old job and regaining the ability to divide again. And then those new cells can redifferentiate and become completely new types of cells to heal the wound. It's an absolutely amazing power of regeneration. And that brings us to one last, really profound thought to leave you with. The fact that a plant's cells can just change their entire identity, their whole job description, based simply on where they are and what the plant needs at that moment, well, that's pretty mind-blowing. It really challenges our whole idea of what an organism is. It suggests it's not just some fixed collection of parts, but this dynamic, incredibly adaptable community of cells that are constantly talking to each other, responding, and rebuilding. It's pretty cool. Something to think about next time you see a plant.